How's it going, everyone? It's getting to be that time of year. The TWIF series, fantasy football. That's right. And we're not quite to the draft yet as far as my league goes. So, you're not going to have the week 1 fantasy predictions and your post-draft analysis video for a couple more weeks, although I know you're looking forward to it. So, this will be a how to draft fantasy football league. This video is obviously intended to help the new players that have never played fantasy football before learn how to draft their fantasy football team. Okay, so there's a few things you need to know about drafting your fantasy football team. First of all, let's just create the assumption that you are not doing an auction draft and your league is about 12 people. And it's not like a pay league or a keeper league or anything that a bad person would do. This is like a normal fantasy league. Okay, so the first thing that you want to keep in mind is you want to have a fantasy football build order. Now, the people that play StarCraft are going to get this, but for those who don't, I will explain. A build order is like a set list of things that you do in a specific order. For instance, a StarCraft build order would be like, at 14 supply, make a spawning pool. At 15 supply, take your gas geyser. A fantasy football build order would be like, round 1, draft a quarterback. Round 2 and 3, draft running backs. Round 4, draft a receiver, and so on. Now, you might say like, oh, well, I already know what players I want, so why wouldn't I just draft players? Like, why wouldn't I say like, I want to get Aaron Rodgers and Maurice Jones-Drew and Adrian Peterson? Well, there is a reason why you don't do that. It is because if you draft like that, your team will turn out like crap. Because if you have all these names in your head that you want to draft, first of all, they're probably overzealous and they're going to get picked, and you're going to be sitting there at round 3 with half of your players already gone, and then you're going to be screwed. Second of all, as I take a sippy, is that you're going to miss out on steals. A steal would be like, if I'm sitting here drafting my team and Adrian Peterson for some reason isn't taken by the 3rd round. Not very likely, but if I already have all these names of like, I want Maurice Jones-Drew, I want like all these guys, and for some reason Adrian Peterson's not on my list, maybe because he's fumble prone. If you're like, well, I don't want a fumble prone guy, that's fine. But if you have a set list of names of players, that's going to work out worse for you than if you just have positions and draft the best position each round. Because you might not want Adrian Peterson first round because he's fumble prone, but if you can pick up Adrian Peterson in the 3rd round, you're going to want to get him. Because even if you hate the guy, say you're like a huge Bears fan, even if there's no way in hell you're going to start Adrian Peterson, still has huge trade value. So you always want to have your draft build orders set up position by round as opposed to players or players by round. As I bring up my notepad here as a visual aid, you can see that my second tip is consider injuries and holdouts. Now, if we want to talk about the best running backs playing right now that you would draft in fantasy football, you'd probably say like Maurice Jones-Drew, Arian Foster, Adrian Peterson, guys like that. Well, Maurice Jones-Drew is holding out for a contract. Adrian Peterson is coming off of an ACL injury. Jamal Charles is coming off of an ACL injury. So that's something you need to consider. Just try to remember and look and see who has injuries or who's holding out for contracts. Because I've seen people like Ben draft potential risk players, we'll call them, really early on and get screwed. Bye weeks for the same position, guys. This is like a common sense thing, but this is a tutorial for the newbies, and newbies will make this mistake. Remember that in football, players have bye weeks. There's 1 week where like, oh, the Colts just aren't going to play this week. So say you pick up Peyton Manning for the Denver Broncos, and he's off week 10. You don't want your, say your backup quarterback is Ben Roethlisberger, and he also has a bye week 10. You're screwed. You don't have anyone to start week 10. So the way to alleviate this problem is when you're drafting, check the bye weeks and make sure you don't draft your backups on the same bye weeks as your starters. And then obviously this one's pretty obvious, injury prone. You want to stay away from injury prone guys like Jamal Charles or Brian Westbrook if he still played. He was a big injury prone guy. People like that, I there's tons of them. Too many to count. Just try to stay away from those guys as you can, if you can, even though they do have a very big upside. You always want to toe the line with your fantasy team between players with tremendous upside and high risk and consistent players. For instance, last year I finished winning the consolation bracket. I finished fifth. That's largely because most of my players were very high risk, high reward, very boom or bust. So I would lose games that I shouldn't have lost because my receiving core combined for 9 points. Then obviously consistency, like I was talking about. Are the players boom or bust? Whatever. You obviously want more consistent players over boom or bust. And then dark horses. When you get into the late rounds of your fantasy football draft, you're gonna have your build order, right? Your quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever. In the end, it's gonna say like it's gonna be more along the lines of like backup receiver, backup quarterback, backup running back, and all the big names are gonna be gone. So you want to use your football knowledge to try to get some dark horse people that no one knows about. For instance, like Marcellus Bennett, the backup tight end for the Cowboys. You could possibly predict some far-fetched thing like, oh, I think Jason Witten might get hurt, or I think Bennett's going to get some more touches, and no one's going to draft Bennett. So you might be able to pick Bennett up at the last round and get a solid backup tight end. You never know. The point of a dark horse is you're going to take a risk with this guy, but it might pan out. A probably better example of a dark horse is like Cam Newton. Like he went undrafted in a lot of leagues because he looked like a turnover-prone running quarterback who wasn't going to amount to much. Now, obviously, after his success, he got picked up in every league, but still, he was a dark horse at the beginning of the year. My last tip I have for you in this video is don't pick players based on skill. Pick players based on numbers. I remember the first year I played fantasy football, I picked so many players just based off of skill. Like Steve Smith for the Panthers, great skill player, not that good of a number player until like last year. Another good example of this might be, like Felix Jones.